Hi, everyone. Welcome. I was just saying, if you missed it already or you missed it before, get really comfortable because we need to pay attention to our bodies. We need to respect our bodies. We need to actually know what's happening and what's going on. And one of those things involves just paying attention to how comfortable we are in whatever moment. So, if you kind of have to use the bathroom, go now. It's okay. I won't be mad if you miss the first couple of minutes. Totally okay. Um, but yeah, get yourself super comfortable. And welcome to the held sessions. Some new faces here. And what this place is it's honest midlife conversations to help you feel held, resourced, and rooted in yourself again. I'm Shawna Lane. I'm a nervous system and unconscious mind coach, and I'm the founder of Held. This is a free community where we explore the magic of midlife, ask honest questions, get real actionable guidance from experts on everything from anxiety and sleep to hormones, grief, and caring for aging parents, all the midlife things. And I'm so glad you're here spending your valuable, very valuable time with me here today. And it really takes something special to show up for a workshop on shame. I think a lot of people really avoid this topic. So, thank you all so much for being here. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Mm, yeah, excellent. Can you all see that okay? Yeah, heads nodding. Excellent. So, I'm Shauna. And today we're going to be talking about and exploring some deep stuff. So, again, get really comfortable. I invite you to be present and to pay attention to what happens in your body as we go through this work. Take breaks as you need. If anything comes up and you need to just get up and move around, step outside for a second, grab a glass of water, take a few deep breaths, and go for it. I'm hoping it's not going to be super triggering, but always listen to your body and yeah, get really nice and comfy. And today, what we're going to explore is what shame actually is and what it isn't, where it comes from and how it's learned. And we're going to talk about the difference between explicit and implicit shame and why midlife tends to bring shame to the surface. And then how shame lives in the body and in the nervous system, what is actually physiologically happening. And we're going to go through a guided somatic IFS practice together to begin releasing it. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, but we're going to actually start moving in the body, which is where the magic happens. So, what is shame? It's the felt experience of being unworthy of connection, love, and safety. So, that thing I was saying about noticing what you feel in the body. um, yeah, shame is that feeling that you experience when you think, if anybody truly understood this about me, they wouldn't want me or trust me or love me. And it can be really hard to hear that without actually feeling something in the body for some. So, what shame isn't is guilt, embarrassment, and low self esteem. And that's often confused with these things. But guilt says, I did something wrong, and that's about the behavior. And we can actually use guilt to motivate us to be different. And embarrassment is that kind of fleeting social, oh, super embarrassing. And you can laugh about it later. And then low self esteem is sort of this general sense of inadequacy, but shame is this very acute, something's wrong with me. So what happens is shame attacks our identity of who we are as a person and not the behavior. And that's what can make it so destabilizing. Shame is something that we learn in relationships and in the body. So as children, connection is survival. I mean, we need our parents for food. We need our parents because our nervous system's attuned with them. We need them to keep us warm, all the things. So when our attachment feels threatened in childhood, we don't question the relationship. We question ourselves instead. These social strategies were survival patterns, which is why they like ingrain so deeply in us. Um, so we might think, like maybe if I'm different, if I'm quieter, if I'm easier, if I'm better, then they'll stay or they'll keep me, which is really important survival strategies, right? But over time, we adapt and we can turn parts of ourselves, we can turn against parts of ourselves to stay connected. So, and this is when shame becomes part of our identity. And then when, as adults, we can logically think, like, I don't need this person for survival, but we're just like naturally tuned that way and it can become easily part of our identity. So, sources of shame include early attachment experiences, like I just mentioned, and family systems. Also, unspoken rules about what's acceptable. So I'm just going to check here and make sure I'm not missing anybody in Zoom. No. Okay. About what's acceptable, what gets celebrated and what gets ignored. So that's that subtle kind of invisible shame. Cultural and religious messaging about our bodies, about gender. We've got lots of stuff about what girls are supposed to do, what boys are supposed to do, and our inherent goodness, right? This like good girl stuff. And trauma and adverse experiences, like a lot of people will carry shame about being bullied or being abused or being neglected. That's kind of the even deeper stuff. And watching how the adults around us treat themselves. This is a really big one for that subtle implicit shame, right? Like learning how we should treat ourselves by watching what our parents do or adults around us. So we might experience two different types of shame. There's that explicit shame, which is very direct, and someone saying that you're like weird or wrong or bad. And then there's implicit shame. It's that kind of invisible, it's indirect. So they're not necessarily saying anything, but you're really noticing what they're celebrating, what they're ignoring, what's allowed, and you might start to adapt or shrink yourself in response to that. So some examples of explicit shame. And if you can relate to any of these and you feel so inclined, you can drop a little emoji in the chat because I'm sure that some of these are going to hit home. Being criticized or policed around your body weight or your appearance. So this is like way less common now. But growing up in the 80s and 90s, which I think a lot of us did, it's just way more common to like comment on children's bodies, which is pretty wild. But they might say something like, hey, you might want to take it easy on those potato chips, or just something kind of either direct or subtle that comments on your body. Being directly compared to others, like siblings or peers, like, look at Sally, she doesn't have dirt on her face. Like, what do we learn about ourselves? Maybe being ridiculed or sent away when you make a mistake. Like, why would you do that? Go to your room. And that really teaches us like when our behavior is something that can maintain connection and when we're absolutely not welcome anymore. And again, that was like very common parenting and continues to be for some people, which is, actually can be quite harmful. So, being shamed or punished for expressing anger, right, as women, our needs or our boundaries. One example of this is you're too sensitive, which is one that definitely lands for me. And I was just talking to my husband about this, and you're too sensitive is like a really quick way to get somebody to shut up, right? Because any response you're going to have to that is going to be just reinforcing this idea that like, yes, I am sensitive. And when that idea of being too sensitive is the rejection, you want to kind of fight against it. And so you'll just like, it's very easy to be like, okay, I guess maybe I can be tough. Yeah. That's definitely one that I took on and embodied from childhood. And even in adult relationships. So this kind of stuff can very much happen in adult relationships too, specifically, or like most often when we are entering new friend groups, like if we move to a new place or um, just like meeting new people. And it's like, okay, well, what's allowed in this group, right? Um, excuse me. Who do you think you are? This is a really big one that we can hear from other people, but we can also really put on ourselves. So, I can share a little bit of my own story is that with shame, and shame really resonates with me. It's something that, when the Brene Brown stuff came out years ago, I was like, okay, yeah, this hits really hard. Um, and my shame story starts with, being a child of the 80s and 90s, having that kind of parenting, but also I literally lived on the other side of the tracks. So, and I was like a middle class family, so it's sort of wild to think about that. But when I went to high school, it was sort of like a more affluent neighborhood, and I found out from somebody that they weren't allowed to come study at my house because I lived on the other side of the tracks. And I was like, what? like, and so from that point on, there was actually kind of two parts that came alive in me, and one of them was this part that was like very urgently trying to culture myself to prove that, I wasn't this way, that I could be like everybody else. And then this other part that was like very much like embracing the identity and like wanting to live up to the reputation. Like, yeah, you think that about me? I'll show you. Like, I can be really tough if I need to be. So shame can really land on both of those sides. Another personal experience for me is that I was both gifted and ADHD. So I have all this like neurospicy stuff in there. So, it's like being like told, oh, you're so smart. You get to go into this special class, but like somehow still find it very difficult to organize my thoughts into a paper. So, what does that say about who I am? So, lastly, on the explicit shame list is ordinary requests loaded with tone. So this is that like 80s or 90s parenting of like, wash your face or like clean this up, like with that tone of like, what is actually wrong with you? So that implicit shame, the invisible kind, it's a little sneaky, might be being praised for being easy or good and low maintenance, which might lead us to feel like you're too much. Receiving praise or attention only when you achieve. And this is that like I'm only lovable when I'm productive. Right. So this really goes into that masculine energy, that kind of like girl boss archetype that so many of us are like just so happily jumping into. Um, but in doing that, like what about our being energy? Like, can there be softness too? One of them might be feeling a subtle contraction when you express yourself. And it might not be obvious, but just noticing that people kind of just like slightly turn away or don't respond right away, or just like feeling that energy and just feeling like maybe, is it me? Am I hard to love? Sex and sexual shame is huge. When sex is not talked about, for example, or avoided, it can be received as that my desires are wrong. We get a lot of that like dirty girl shame when we have any kind of like desires or fantasies or even act on our sexuality. And it can manifest in a few ways. We might just really like shrink our arrows and become like very, straight edge kind of like good girl. But we can also flip on the other side of it and really kind of drop into that identity again of like, I guess I'm just bad. So this is how I'm going to behave. Can see ourselves as being kind of wrong. Yeah. And then watching how mothers are judged, no matter what they choose. We all have felt like a bad mom at some point if you're a mom, right? Either you're a helicopter mom or two hands off. Watching people be excluded or judged or gossiped about. So they're not saying anything about you, but you are learning from their gossip what is accepted and what's not accepted and how you need to behave to be accepted in the group. Another really good like 80s example of implicit shame is your mom walking around going like, I'm so fat today. Look at this big fat belly. Like, oh, I could never wear something like that. I'm too fat. And then looking at our own bodies and seeing our own bodies change in midlife and saying like, I guess that means the same thing about me. And then this is kind of like a weird roundabout one, but sometimes being overly praised can feel shameful too. So, if you receive a lot of that, like, oh, you are so good at doing this. Like for me, it's that like giftedness, like you're going to be a star, like you're going to be so successful, you're the best. And then feeling like that doesn't really match with your experience, then without saying like, no, I'm not. You're going to have this feeling that's like, oh, if they knew the truth about me, like I traced this, or I'm just, like you don't know. I'm not that good. So, why is all of this stuff coming up, especially in midlife? Well, we have a lot of identity shifts in midlife, and our roles might shift. Like if we're parents, our kids might be growing up. Maybe things are changing at work, but we may not be needed as much, or we may just feel less aligned with the roles that we've agreed to before. We've like made these agreements with people in relationships in our work. And then at some point we kind of go, is this still me? Like, is this still what I want? And like, oh, the identity doesn't align. And when that doesn't align, that can really bring up a lot of shame. Hormonal changes can make emotional experiences feel bigger and harder to push down. So this is talked a lot about in the midlife communities, is that our estrogen is lower, our progesterone, I don't know, is lower, and they help us manage stress, right? So everything can just feel a lot harder. That's like when can't stand the sound of somebody chewing. It's like just can't freaking handle it. Um, Also, our nervous systems actually become more sensitive to social threat, which is something you kind of think about like in teenagers. But I heard this reference to like midlife and perimenopause being queenagers. Like we kind of go through this like same kind of like some of the same kind of puberty things that like, oh, I'm really sensitive again for some reason to the idea of this threat. So that can again bring up shame. Cultural messaging about aging, our value, and our visibility, like maybe we might have heard somebody say like, oh, that woman's a little too old to be doing this or that, or just noticing how you might have taken up more space in a room before. But this obviously isn't everybody, right? Like some women naturally kind of fall into this like fierce, like matriarchal era with like firm boundaries, caring less about what other people think. Like this is this like midlife women that we kind of imagine. And for some people, I think that this does kind of happen very naturally. But if you grew up in like any kind of people pleasing, any kind of fawning, any like good girl stuff, or a lot of times there's kind of a shedding of layers that needs to happen to get to that place of being like, I could actually care less. Um, and then, lastly on this list here is how our body changes challenge our identity and the illusion of control. So I was at a funeral celebration of life a couple of weeks ago wearing a silk blouse and literally sweat through my underarms in my blouse. And it was like light green to dark green. And so I almost missed the first part of the ceremony service because I was in the bathroom with like the dryer blow drying my armpits. So things like that are definitely different. And some of us, I can definitely relate to the feeling of like at some point in my 20s feeling kind of important. you know like I was I could like get in places for free and people knew me. I could like go places and everybody knew who I was, and now that's just like not happening anymore. And I'm like, who am I becoming invisible, and what does that mean, and is that still important to me, and just all these questions that come up. So that brings us to shame and our identity. So, when life feels like a mess and we're not at our best, we often believe that the messy version of ourselves is the real us, right? We can totally enmesh with this idea, this part of us that's like, I'm a mess. And we might think that any version of us that is capable or successful or, achieving anything or has achieved anything has just been an act or it's just luck. And this is the core of how shame distorts our sense of who we are. So, shame is actually a nervous system state and not just an emotion. So, when we experience a social threat, our brain reads it as danger and we sort of tap into the amygdala, right? And the first response when we experience danger would be this fight or flight response. Like our body gets activated. And that's when you might feel kind of like a flushing, like, your body's getting flooded with these neurochemicals that are going to get you up and going and fighting. But if you're an infant or a young child, or if you're like at work or in a relationship with people that you don't want to damage the relationship, those things might not be available to you. You might not be able to say like, don't say that about me. It's not true. Or I can be this and that's okay. Like we don't have access to that in that time. So what happens is we turn to the next nervous system response, which is that collapse and shutdown. So this is the area of our nervous system where shame lives. It's my fault. It's something's wrong with me. And the purpose for this is to protect the connection, but it's really like collapsing and like imploding on the body. And then when we carry shame, it registers as a constant threat to your identity. So the nervous system is always in that alert state, which requires a ton of energy. And then we develop these coping strategies like self-policing, performing, shrinking, and overworking. And these strategies are actually parts, and we're going to get into that a little bit further on in the practice, but we develop these parts to protect us from, um, you know, sabotaging our relationships. Um, Suppressing shame takes an incredible amount of energy, and that also compounds on that collapse state and on the depression that can come along with that. Is that we're just like exhausted from trying to be something else, to keep the parts of us that are undesirable hidden from everybody else. And sometimes we're very aware of this happening, and other times it's just like really running in the background. And so that's another reason why doing these practices can be really helpful, because if you're experiencing things like brain fog and fatigue and health issues and depression, it's like looking deeper into what could be contributing to it can really help. And because these survival states feel really familiar, the nervous system keeps going back to them even when they're painful. It's that old like familiar hell versus the unfamiliar heaven, is that we get into these patterns of like, maybe speaking negatively to ourselves or just feeling a certain way. And our system will go to that same feeling again and again if we don't reprogram on a body level. So, again, this is why shame can feel like an identity rather than something that we're carrying, because it's in the body. But the good news is that as we release shame, the body can have more energy and capacity to heal, and we can start to reframe challenges as normal parts of life versus personal deficits. So we might say, like, having a tough day. We might say, parenting is really challenging sometimes, versus saying this always happens to me, like I'm a terrible parent, or I'm not a nice person. Being able to reframe it is the goal. Okay. So shame can disconnect us also from our basic needs. I know this is a lot of like doom and gloom, but we're getting there. We can override a lot of those basic needs. Like I was saying at the beginning, like you gotta like try to actually sit comfortably, like listen to your body, whatever your body needs. And I teach this to all my clients in my coaching practice, is like very much tuning into like what it is that we need as humans, as women, as like remember that you actually have a body too. We'll like often live not only just in our heads, but like up here somewhere, you know? And what starts as a short-term strategy can become a long-term identity of being like low maintenance. You know, like, oh, I don't have big needs. And that's easy. And so it makes me an easy person. That makes me easier to love because the real me is difficult. Um, so unintentionally sacrifice true connection to performing connection. So this is the idea where um, fitting in, like doing things in order to be able to fit in, doesn't mean belonging. And when we're fitting in, we're not actually being ourselves. And when we belong, we are being authentic. So the more we try to fit in, actually, the less um, action, the less possibility we have of actually having true connection with somebody. So shame doesn't just show up in one way either. It can pull in opposite directions. So it's that collapse end, staying small, hiding, people pleasing, that chronic self-neglect, perfectionism as a way of never being called out, overworking for our worth, being stuck in that should mode. I like to say I'm shoulding all over myself, right? Should. And then the other end of it is that I'm bad anyways. So when it comes to identity, a part of us might just stop fighting it altogether and be like, I might as well go out again tonight because I'm a bad person. We might blow up a relationship before it gets hard because that's what I do, right? Sabotaging something good because we don't believe that we deserve it because that shame is really running the show. And both of these can actually be happening simultaneously, which is like incredibly confusing. But both of them are shame and they're both reinforcing in an effort to avoid pain. Another thing that shame does is it encourages us to split ourselves into parts. So we might show different versions of who we are in different spaces. And this is very like normal and common. We might be like more funny with one group, or we might be a bit more serious with another group. But this is really like learning what's allowed in which places. Like, what are the rules of this friend group? We learn which traits are welcome and which ones need to stay hidden. And it's like this that self-policing of being like, how do I need to be? How do I need to be? And over time, fitting in feels safer than being whole. So we hide our wholeness. There's, you know, this the commonly understood idea that at the end of life, we reflect and say, the most important thing in our lives was our relationships. You know, and so I think at midlife, we kind of start going, all right, so all of the ways that I've sort of performed to achieve certain things in my life, but what's happening with my relationships? And many of us are lucky to have like a few really close friends that know us deeply. But really being able to live authentically gives us so much more access to, you know, what's possible, like what actually feels good for us. And then it's actually kind of funny how, you know, we're taught to teach our kids to like be yourself. You know, when you go to school, like just be yourself, and people will like you for who you are, or be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. But at the same time, like all of us are policing, self-policing in some way or another. And then, so the way that shame shows up in the body might look like a collapse in the chest. You know, when the shoulders start rolling in, it's like a visible physical manifestation of shame. You might feel kind of like heat or flushing in your face, a frozen throat, a drop in the stomach, the feeling of just wanting to disappear. Fatigue, having like long running fatigue is really common, just from what I talked about with all that energy requirement. And then tension around sexuality and desire and worthiness, and that nervous system collapse state. There is a silver lining about all of this stuff in midlife, which is that the neurobiological changes that increase our vulnerability to emotional pain in midlife, that's social pain, it simultaneously unlocks remarkable opportunities for personal growth, wisdom, and authenticity. So it's that idea of like enter through the upset. When something feels hard, it gives us the opportunity to like crack it open and see what's inside there. And what's inside is really the most important. So, research indicates that although midlife brains tend to react more strongly to negative social cues, we also show heightened responses to positive social interactions and emotional learning. So, again, we're like wanting to have these like big love experiences in our lives. And we might look ahead and say, like, okay, I'm halfway along. Like, what else? What I need some more. Give me some more. Yeah, I see Roma in the chat recovering from girl boss burnout still from last year. Yeah, yeah. So, what do we actually do with all of this? Now that I've loaded you guys with all of this doom and gloom about shame, understanding shame, understanding all of this stuff, it doesn't actually really sit. It can help us to discover where it is and, what it's contributing to in our lives. But the conscious mind can understand and the body still carries it. So what moves it actually is turning toward the part of you that's been holding it, sometimes actually for decades, and then letting her know that she doesn't have to hold it anymore. Right? Being okay with, and even like wanting that realness and saying, okay, now is the time. That's what we're going to do now. So, the practice we're going to use today is based on internal family systems model of psychotherapy, which is developed by Richard Schwartz. We've got Helena with us in the room, who was in my IFS coaching cohort. She knows all of this stuff too. Um, So IFS is internal family systems, and it's rooted in kind of Jungian psychology, shadow work stuff. And basically what it says is that our psyche is made up of parts, and the parts develop throughout our lives to protect us in the best way that they know how at the time. So parts develop to protect us. And in IFS, shame isn't a flaw to fix. Um, it's a part carrying a burden. And usually we pick it up in childhood. But the practice today is about meeting a part, not fighting it, not perfecting it, just sort of making contact and witnessing and offering some support. And in order to do this, you don't need any prior experience with IFS. But I did want to show you just a little visual that I created. And this is sort of like the visual of how I um, imagine the self and the persona and the shadow to all work together. I feel like this is really helpful when you're in the practice to be able to have an image in your mind. So we all have a true self, and our true self is inherently calm and kind and loving and connected to all things. It's our conscious awareness, and it's something that is naturally present in all of us. And the more access we have to this, the better we feel. Okay. What can happen is that we actually get enmeshed with a part. And so the way that I've depicted this here is the shadow, and it's sort of the stuff that's all around us. And this might be our adaptations, like ways that we've learned to hide ourselves, ways that we've learned to armor, mistakes that we've made, some of our shame, our trauma, and just like messy life stuff. And then on the outside of all that is our idealized self. It's the persona, and it's the part that we want others to see. And for some of us, that persona is like a perfect good girl. And for others, that persona is like just tough enough, or it's like totally tough, or it's like, like any variation of what we want people to see for us to feel the safest that we can. Another like next level part of this is that often when we set goals, we imagine our idealized self achieving those goals. And we imagine that all of the messy stuff is going to be gone and then we're going to achieve the goal, which is something that never happens, right? We carry all of us with us at all times. So, with shame, what happens is we become enmeshed or blended with that shadow or with that mess. And we feel like the mess is what we are, but we're never just mess, right? We'll never be away from it. It's there. But how we embrace it, how we connect with it, how we like own ourselves and our story is what matters. So in our wholeness, we are all of the things. And this is what makes us complex and whole and authentic. And Carl Jung called this individuation. And that's integrating with our wholeness. So in IFS, we talk about unburdening the shame parts and giving them new, healthier roles, which is kind of very much the same thing. Like we're not sending anything away. We're keeping it here and unburdening those parts. So in both instances, being a perfect shell without any substance on the inside is never the goal. And we don't even like people like that, right? When you meet somebody who's like so perfect. It's like you can't get through. Like there's not anything underneath it. There's a hollowness, right? Um, are you guys picking up what I'm putting down? Yeah. Do you like my drawing? It took me much longer than I would like to admit, but she turned out okay. All right. So let's get into it. Grab your pen and paper or whatever you're going to use to jot down some notes. And just knowing that like emotions might come up here and that's totally okay. And they might not, that's totally okay too. But if ever it gets to be too much, you can always like take a few deep breaths. Again, like step outside, grab a sip of water, which is what I'm gonna do right now. Mm. But this IFS shaming practice, de-shaming practice, excuse me, um, is four basic parts. The first thing that we're going to do is recognize the shame. We're going to notice where it lives in the body. And we're going to create space around it with ourselves. And then we're going to welcome and accept that part from the perspective of having space. So I'm going to set a timer for about 90 seconds. And what I want you to journal on is what traits or behaviors were celebrated at home, either with words or attention, and what traits or behaviors were frowned upon. Just watch the. Okay. Now, if you look over your list, if is there one that stands out as feeling the most present right now? If any of these things are, still hanging around. And if there isn't one from this list, just think back to that explicit and implicit shame list that I was talking about before. And of all those things, what kind of stood out to you the most? And if you feel so inclined, you can drop it in the chat. But No, it's shame. It's one of those things. We work hard to keep it secret, but there is something therapeutic about sharing. And what we're going to do is just name this shame. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So we're going to notice when we think about this thing, when you think about this thing, you think if anybody knew this about me, then they wouldn't love me, they wouldn't accept me. And you want to feel it just enough to kind of locate it in your body. And now we're going to drop in and get a little grounded. So just getting really comfortable in your seat. Yeah. Letting your shoulders drop, relaxing the muscles around your eyes and the back of your tongue. And then if your eyes are still open, you feel comfortable doing this, you can let them gently close. Mhm. And just allow the breath to bring in some more softness. And just noticing your breath coming in or out. Yeah. Noticing the space around your body. And letting your awareness open behind you. And now from this connected state, see if you can locate that shame sensation in or around your body again. You might find a slight contraction or heaviness. And just get curious here about what that feels like. You could use metaphor, just like, does it feel heavy or solid, fluttery, like a butterfly? And as you notice this sensation, just get curious about where you're noticing it from. See if you can locate the observer. Again, not dropping into any story here about that part, just noticing it as a sensation only and holding it in that wider field of awareness. And if there's a part here that comes up that's wanting to fix it or change it, like a problem solver part, you can ask that part to step aside for just a moment. So in this practice, there's no problem. We're just being witness to this sensation. Yeah. And that deeper awareness would have no agenda, just presence. You may know that you are in this feeling, this presence of self because you feel a sense of compassion or curiosity, expansiveness. Now see if you can offer that sensation, just some of that compassion. And that might mean placing your hands there. It might mean sending some breath to that part. And maybe gratitude, if that feels right. Just noticing what happens. Mhm. Now letting that part know that you'll come back again. This is a practice of building trust. Um, it may not totally shift in one sitting, but this is where that contact starts. Taking a nice deep breath in. And when you feel ready, blinking your eyes back open. And coming back to the space. Yeah, welcome back. How was that for everybody? Hmm. If there's one word that you can bring back from this to drop in the chat, what was that? Emotional. Yeah. Yeah. Grounding. Thank you. Yeah. A lot of these things we carry for a long time. It's like carrying a heavy bag, you know? And there can be a lot of emotions when we start to think about the idea of putting that down. Yeah. Difficult to stay focused on it. Yeah, Zoom and life, but I can share this slide deck with you guys if you like, and it's a practice you could do on your own, and we can do it together. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Just have a couple more points. One is social de-shaming. Um, sharing your shame can be an incredible tool for releasing the burden. So some examples of that might be inviting someone over to your house when it's messy. Like, I mean, really messy, not the kind of like acceptable messy. Telling a trusted friend when you fail, and even saying like, I'm in shame. And what inside the held sessions community, I would love for us to be able to share and connect on this way and just say like, I'm struggling right now because like we as women, we love to help and we love to connect. And so it's not a burden. And I know it can be challenging, but shame cannot survive being witnessed with kindness. So if you want to take a screenshot of this or just grab your camera, there's some journal prompts that you can go through to continue some of this work. I can send them out to you too. I can put them in the community chat. And then just lastly, this work matters because releasing shame allows you to reclaim your identity, speak needs with clarity, embrace desire without apology, trust your instincts again, and live from authenticity and not performance. So give yourself permission to be whole and weird and sexy and angry or quiet or whatever it is that is you is totally welcome and allowed. There's just some information if you want to go deeper with me about my coaching. You can do a 30-day coaching container, or I have the Held Portal, which is a library of breath work and hypnosis. And I do still offer single sessions sometimes too. So just reach out if I can help you anymore. And thank you all so much for being here. And for being part of this incredible community. I feel so blessed to be part of this with you all. And next month, May 27th, we have Brooke Davis from Marriage and Perimenopause, and we're going to be talking about the relational stuff. And that's going to be a really juicy one. So I hope that you will join us for that too. Let me stop share. Okay. Thank you all so much. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, you're muted. Yolanta, I can't hear you. Zoom. Mhm. That's okay. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Bye.